Hey everyone, Erick Stakelbeck here. Today on the newscast, a major Middle East update. Iran carrying out new missile tests, suicide drones in Yemen, and the Iran Al-QAEDA connection growing. Get all the latest details coming up. Hey folks, Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast. A lot going on that we need to share with you today. Some major developments in the Middle East over the past 24 hours alone. As we like to say here on the newscast, the Middle East never sleeps. How about the Iranian regime unveiling 2 new warships and carrying out a major missile test? How about the Houthi rebels in Yemen? Remember them? We discussed them on the Monday, January 11th newscast. You can check it out here in our archives. Acquiring, reportedly, suicide drones from their Iranian masters. And how about the Iranian regime, the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, joining forces in an unholy alliance with Al-QAEDA, the terror organization that has more American blood on its hands than any other. We'll get into all of the breaking details in a second. Before I do, I just want to encourage you to subscribe to the Watchman News channel right here on YouTube, and please click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. Folks, events are unfolding so rapidly right now in the world's most strategic and chaotic region, the Middle East. We want to be watchmen on the wall for you, to keep you updated on all of these breaking developments that matter to you no matter where you live. So let's get into it. The Iranian regime, and I discussed this briefly on yesterday's newscast, but on Wednesday, January 13th, and today, Thursday, January 14th, the Iranian regime is carrying out a major drill in the Gulf of Oman. Now, they have unveiled 2 new warships. One is a missile launcher. Missiles are launched from the one warship, and the other is a helicopter carrier. So they've unveiled the warships, number 1. Number 2, they conducted cruise missile tests. It seems like these were short-range missiles that Iran was firing over the past 2 days. Now, short-range means, to me, the Persian Gulf region, where obviously the United States has assets. A lot of shipping goes through that vital Strait of Hormuz at the mouth of the Persian Gulf, obviously a vital waterway. So Iran, a show of force and a message sent on their end, I would say. We've been talking a lot here on the newscast over the past few weeks about the tit for tat, the U.S. and Israel sending messages and the Iranian regime sending them right back as the region continues to be a tinderbox. In the past week alone, Iran has announced, number 1, and perhaps most importantly, that they will be enhancing their enriched uranium stockpiles on the path to a nuclear weapon. Secondly, we reported this also on the newscast last week. Check it out again in our archives right here on YouTube. We reported about Iran's drone drill, their first ever military drone drill. More on drones in a second, by the way. But in this military drone drill that Iran carried out, it involved hundreds of Iranian-made drones which could carry out air-to-air attacks, air-to-surface attacks, surveillance, obviously, and suicide drones. Now, last Friday, January 8th, Iran also unveiled an underground missile base on the Persian Gulf coastline. Iran's been talking about this for months, by the way, how they have, in their words, underground missile cities dotting the entire Persian Gulf coastline. So tensions are ratcheting up, and now Newsweek magazine is reporting that the Houthi rebels in Yemen, remember them? Now, the United States, last weekend, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo just announced that the United States, on January 19th, the day before President Trump leaves office, will officially designate those Houthi rebels in Yemen as a foreign terrorist organization alongside the likes of Hezbollah, Hamas, and Al-QAEDA. Now, who are the Houthis? And again, we talked about this on the Monday newscast. You can check it out in our archives. That was January 11th. The Houthis have conquered large areas of Yemen, in particular northern Yemen. And key point here, they are Shia radicals, apocalyptic ideology shared with their masters in Iran. They are a proxy armed and funded and supported by the Iranian regime, like so many other terror outfits in the region. Newsweek is reporting that the Iranian regime has supplied those Houthi rebels in Yemen with drones that can reportedly travel over 1,000 miles, hint, hint, drones that could reach from Yemen to Israel to the north, and these drones would be suicide or kamikaze drones that could be packed with a payload of explosives. Now, Israel, just last week, no coincidence, I don't think, moved one of their Iron Dome missile defense batteries to the southernmost city of Eilat, which is on the Gulf of Aqaba at the mouth of the Red Sea. Yemen obviously straddles the Red Sea, again, about 1,000 miles to the south of Israel. So Israel is very aware of the threat emanating from Yemen to the south. Israeli Defense Forces officials have talked about over the past 3 weeks or so, yes, we are concerned about attacks coming from Gaza, Lebanon, and Syria, of course, the inner ring of nations that borders Israel and entities like Hamas that border Israel there in Gaza. But we are also concerned about Iraq and Yemen, which are not on Israel's immediate borders, obviously, but which have Iranian proxies operating within them. I'm talking about the Houthis, obviously, in Yemen, and those various radical Shia militias in Iraq, which are under full control and directives by the Iranian regime. One more topic we'd like to hit on before we go today is the growing relationship between Iran and Al-QAEDA. Talk about an unholy alliance right now. I wanted to address this on yesterday's newscast, but the major news, obviously, were those major Israeli airstrikes against Iranian targets in eastern Syria. Check out yesterday's newscast for all the details there. But on Tuesday, January 12th, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo gave this speech, and folks, to me, this should have been a blaring headline in media outlets across the United States and across the world to have the world's #1 state sponsor of terrorism, Iran, joining forces with Al-QAEDA, the organization behind the deadliest terror attacks in American history. Call me crazy, but that is a big deal. Now, for years we have known that Al-QAEDA members and Al-QAEDA officials have been living in Iran. After 9/11, some of them fled across the border into Iran. Now, they were apparently under some sort of house arrest there in Iran, untouched, but not allowed to move around freely. According to Secretary Pompeo, all of that changed in 2015 in the wake of the Iran nuclear deal. Now, Iran is allowing these Al-QAEDA operatives to operate freely and move around the country. We reported here in the newscast back in November that Israel took out Al-QAEDA's #2 leader, Mohammed al-Masri, in Iran. He was living in Iran, Al-QAEDA's #2 leader, apparently an honored and welcomed guest of the Iranian regime, moving around freely. Now, I want to quote Secretary Pompeo's speech directly because, again, it was very important and you need to know about it when these two evil forces are teaming up. But one quick note, some have already said they've scoffed at Pompeo's speech. Some of the analysts in Washington, D.C. and Beltway circles have said this is overblown. Iran is Shia and Al-QAEDA is Sunni. Yes, there are theological differences there, but at the end of the day, they have a shared enemy or enemies in the form of the United States, the West in general, and Israel, so they will work together. Hey, they'll be at each other's throats in the battlefields of Syria and elsewhere in the region, but in this case, they will work together. I know it sounds kind of odd, but their adage is, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and Israel, the U.S., and the West are certainly the greater enemy in the eyes of the Iranian regime and Al-QAEDA. So here's what Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said. I want to quote directly from him. I'll just read it from my phone. He said on Tuesday, January 12th in Washington, D.C. that, and I quote, Al-QAEDA has a new home base. It is the Islamic Republic of Iran. By the way, go to the State Department website. You can read the entire statement. Just go to www.state.gov and you'll find the remarks from January 12th there. I'm quoting from them, but you can see it for yourself and read the entire speech. It's a 5-minute read and it's worth your time. Here's just some important excerpts for you. As a result of this relationship, Pompeo says, bin Laden's wicked creation is poised to gain strength and capabilities. He goes on to say Iran decided to allow al-QAEDA to establish a new operational headquarters inside Iran, and that the Iranian Ministry of Intelligence and Security have provided safe havens and logistical supports, things like travel documents, ID cards, and passports that enable al-QAEDA activity. One more thing to share. He says that Tehran has allowed al-QAEDA to fundraise, to freely communicate with al-QAEDA operatives around the world, and to perform many other functions that were previously directed by al-QAEDA from their old home bases of Afghanistan and Pakistan. He says al-QAEDA now has time because they're inside of Iran. They have access to money. They have a range of Iranian support. They now have new tools of terror. And he goes on to say that Iran is the new Afghanistan, the key geographic hub for al-QAEDA, but it's worse, Pompeo says, in that unlike in Afghanistan when al-QAEDA was hiding in the mountains, al-QAEDA today is operating underneath the hard shell of the Iranian regime's protection. Obviously, if you're a terrorist entity, when you have state backing, you are all the more dangerous. Now, al-QAEDA has been eclipsed in recent years by the likes of ISIS, but it looks like this very dangerous terror organization may be seeking to make a major comeback with that Iranian safe harbor. It's a situation we need to keep track of. I think it's no coincidence that Secretary Pompeo gave this speech a week before leaving office. He is clearly very concerned about this Iran-al-QAEDA nexus. We will continue to keep an eye on it for you. Hey, hang in there. Don't let this news discourage you, the wars and rumors of wars that we are hearing, because God is in control. He will never leave you or forsake you, so take heart. We will continue to bring you all of these breaking updates because we think you'd rather know than not know, for your sake, for your kids, for your grandkids. We need to know what's going on in the world, especially as the body of Christ, so we can be salt and light in the darkness. Thanks for joining us. Until next time, God bless you. And remember, never hold your peace.